By the time most people woke up the next morning, it had already happened. Their feeds had already been rearranged by it. Their group chats had already fractured over it, half screaming about what they'd seen, the other half scrambling to find a replay. And in the golf world specifically, in the tight, opinionated, occasionally furious community of people who follow the PGA Tour with the kind of devotion usually reserved for religion, there was something rarer than argument. There was unanimous, borderline stunned agreement that what they had just witnessed was something genuinely different. Something that didn't have a clean precedent. Something that sports fans, real ones, the kind who've been watching for decades and have developed an almost professional immunity to being surprised, were watching on loop with the expression of people trying to figure out if what they saw was real. It was real, and by midnight, the clip had done what only a handful of sports moments ever truly do. It had escaped the sport entirely. It was no longer just a golf story. It was being shared by people who have never watched a full round, who couldn't identify a birdie from a bogey, who stumbled across it on a platform that usually shows them cooking videos and cat compilations. The morning of the day it happened was the kind of morning the PGA Tour produces regularly and nobody documents carefully enough. A Sunday, final round. The field thinned by 2 days of competition down to the survivors, the ones who made the cut, who managed their games, who are still here because some combination of talent and patience and nerve kept them here. He was one of the survivors, but only just. His position on the leaderboard entering the day was the kind that exists in a particular purgatory, far enough back to be dismissed by serious contention talk, close enough that a spectacular round could, theoretically, complicate the math. Sports analysts have a term for this position that is roughly translated as interesting if something goes wrong for everyone else, irrelevant if it doesn't. He'd occupied this kind of position before, several times. His career, if you charted it honestly, was a graph of promising approaches followed by final round afternoons that didn't quite deliver on the morning's suggestion. Not dramatically, not collapses that make broadcast packages, just quiet, professional underperformances that accumulate into a reputation. The reputation of a player who is very good at almost getting there. He knew this reputation existed. He'd been asked about it, with varying degrees of journalistic tact, in more than one media availability. His answers were always composed, thoughtful. The answers of a man who has made a deliberate decision about which truths he's willing to share in front of a camera and which ones he keeps for the dark of the hotel room afterward. His caddy, a man of considerable experience and even more considerable silence, said before the round, "Today feels like something." He said it once. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. They went out and played golf. The front nine was the kind of golf that rewards patience but punishes attention. Meaning, if you watched it expecting fireworks, you'd look away. But if you understood what you were seeing, the careful construction of a round, the deliberate management of risk, the specific discipline of a player who has decided to play his game regardless of what the leaderboard is asking him to do, it was quietly compelling. He birdied the third with a putt that broke more than anyone expected it to. Par saved the sixth from a position that had the broadcast team reaching for politely pessimistic language. Birdied the ninth from 12 feet, with a stroke so unhurried it looked almost like a man practicing rather than competing. By the turn, the leaderboard had become interesting. Not because of him, not yet, but because Sunday afternoon on the PGA Tour has a way of doing what Sunday afternoon always does, redistributing pressure unpredictably, finding the cracks in the leaders, turning a comfortable gap into a conversation. The players at the top were feeling it. You could see it in the way they walked between shots, in the extra half-second before club selection, in the way their caddies were talking more than usual, the body language of people who were trying to manually maintain what had, until an hour ago, been automatic. He was 5 back with 9 holes to play when the cameras first started finding him with genuine intent rather than obligation. Not because he was the story yet, but because someone in a production truck had done the math and decided, if things continue to move in this direction, he might be. Hole 12, birdie. Hole 13, par saved with a chip that would generate its own small admiring commentary if it weren't about to be completely overshadowed by what was coming. Hole 14, another birdie, from a distance that had the broadcast team revising their language from politely interested to actively excited. 2 shots back. 2 shots, with 4 holes left. And somewhere in the accumulated tension of the afternoon, the internet, The part of the internet that follows golf, and the broader part that follows anything with a pulse, had started to notice. 15 is a par 3. A hole that, in most rounds, functions as a brief rest. A single shot at a stationary target, a putt, move on. But par 3s have a way of becoming enormous in the context of a tournament's final hour. They compress everything. All the space of a par 5 collapses into one decision, one swing, one bounce. He hit it to 6 feet. The gallery's reaction told you the state of play better than any broadcast graphic. These were people who had been managing their own investment in this afternoon for 4 hours, who had watched the leaderboard shift and shift back, who had committed, emotionally, to a story, and who now understood that the story was entering its most dangerous chapter. He made the putt. One back. 16. A par 5 he'd been conservative on in previous rounds. Not today. Today the driver came out with the kind of intention that makes caddies quiet and galleries loud. The shot found the fairway. The second found the green. 2 putts, birdie, tied. The word moved through the gallery with a physical quality, like a wind direction change. Tied. The broadcast cut to the leaders. Cut back to him. Cut to the leaderboard graphic. Cut to his face. Composed, completely composed. The face of a man who is either feeling nothing or feeling everything so hard that nothing and everything have become the same expression. 17. A hole he had bogeyed in round 2 and walked away from with an expression he quickly reassembled before anyone could read it clearly. A hole that had taken something from him already this week. He stood on the tee for a long time, longer than his routine required. The cameras caught it, stayed on it. Because that pause, that unusual, unscripted, completely human pause in a sport that trains its participants to minimize exactly this kind of visible hesitation, was the first hint that something different was happening inside him. Something that wasn't just about the mechanics of the next shot. He stepped up, and he hit the best tee shot of his week. What happened on 17, the approach shot, the green, the putt, was brilliant. It will have its own replays, its own highlight package, its own place in the weekly recap. But that is not the moment. That is the setup for the moment. The moment happened on 18. He arrived at the final tee with a one-shot lead. One shot that he had built from 5 back, over the course of a back 9 that the broadcast team was already running out of adjectives for. One shot. And 18. A finishing hole that the course designer had clearly constructed with the intention of making final round leaders feel exactly as uncomfortable as possible, was waiting. The tee shot was fine. Not perfect, slightly right of ideal, but the kind of position you can work with if your head is clear. His head was clear. What happened next is what the internet cannot stop watching. The approach. 147 yards. Wind across, left to right, at a speed that had been inconsistent all afternoon. The green sloped away from him at the back. The pin was positioned, and this is the course designer's malice in its most elegant form, in the one location that made a conservative shot almost as risky as an aggressive one. There was no safe play. Not really. There was only the shot. He took one practice swing. One. And what he did with that golf ball, the trajectory he produced, the precise and almost architecturally perfect way it navigated the wind, caught the slope, checked up, and came to rest, was captured simultaneously by 4 cameras. From above, from the side, from behind the green, and from a fan's phone at the rope line, shaking slightly with the effort of holding it steady. The ball finished inside 2 feet. The sound that came from that gallery, all 4 camera angles captured it differently, and all 4 versions are extraordinary, was not a cheer. Not at first. It was something that preceded a cheer. A collective, involuntary, full-body exhale of recognition. The sound people make when something happens that they immediately understand they will remember. The fan's phone video, shaking, imperfect, the audio peaking in exactly the wrong way, is the one that spread. Because it was the most human. Because you could hear the person holding it make a sound that no sports broadcaster has ever been trained to make and no amount of professional composure could have produced. A sound of pure, unfiltered, completely unguarded awe. 30 million views by the following morning. 62 by the end of the week. The clip had gone everywhere a golf clip has never gone. Late-night comedy writers sharing it unironically. Athletes from other sports commenting on it. People who, 48 hours earlier, would have told you they had no opinion on the PGA Tour, watching it 3 times in a row and sending it to people they love with a single line of text. Watch this. He made the putt. Of course he made the putt. It was 2 feet. But also, it was the end of a very long afternoon and a very long season, and, if you talk to people who know him, a very long internal argument that he had been having with himself for years about whether this version of him, the almost getting there version, was the final version. He made the putt, and he won. And in the aftermath, in the on-course interview, in the media center, in the various filmed moments that a PGA Tour victory generates, he was asked, repeatedly and in different ways, about the approach shot, about the moment, about what he was thinking when he stood over that ball on 18. He gave several answers. Some of them were good. One of them was great. A reporter asked him, when you committed to that shot, knowing what was at stake, knowing where the pin was, were you scared? He thought about it, really thought about it, in a way that made the room go slightly quieter, the way rooms do when they sense that the answer coming isn't going to be the rehearsed one. I think I stopped being scared, he said. I think that's different from not being scared. I think I'd been scared for a long time. And then, on that tee, standing there, I just put it down. I don't know where it went, but I put it down. That quote didn't go as viral as the shot, but it should have, because the shot is extraordinary. The shot is the reason 62 million people pressed play. But the quote is the reason this story matters beyond the scorecard, beyond the ranking points, beyond the trophy and the check and all the things that the PGA Tour officially tracks and measures and files away. He put it down. After all of it, all the years, all the almosts, all the final rounds that didn't quite become what they'd suggested they might. He found a way to set the fear down long enough to make the shot that broke the internet. And somewhere in that fact is something that isn't really about golf at all.